Hello, bosses, and welcome to today's Wednesday workshop. I'm Emily with Bossed Up, and I'm so excited you've decided to join us. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you today Jessica Dobias Aries, who's going to walk us through how to showcase your skills in a skill-based resume. And yes, Jessica shares my last name because she just most recently, as last month, became an official member of my family as my new sister-in-law. So all that being said, I'm so honored to have a boss like Jessica in the family because the skills that she brings with her are so valuable. I'm so excited for you to meet her and hear from her. For anyone who's looking to make a transition or is just getting into the workplace and the working world and has to craft a resume that really showcases their transferable skills, this is the right place for you. And yes, if you want to see wedding photos, you can check out our Instagram feed at bossedup.org for more. For those of you who are new to Bossed Up, here are the 3 guiding principles that permeate everything we do. The first is that work, love, and wellness are connected. So whether it's the TED Talk I recently gave that launched on our website on Monday, or our Bossed Up Bootcamp training program, we firmly believe, and it shows up through all of our work, that a happy, healthy personal life leads to a sustainable, productive, and impactful professional career. We also believe that community is key. We are here to support one another on our journeys for self-improvement and achievement. We women especially are not competitive with one another. We are supportive of one another because when other women do well, we all do better. And finally, something you'll learn about me pretty quickly, if you haven't already, I'm a bit of a data junkie and research nerd. So everything we do here is grounded in the latest research. So you know that what you're getting is information that can be applied, that's grounded in the facts, not just our opinions. Now, throughout today's conversation, I will be chronicling some of Jessica's top tips at our Twitter feed, bossedup.org, which, yes, is the same handle for our Instagram feed. And I'll also be using the same hashtag we use every Wednesday workshop, hashtag BossTip, for those that are most impactful and shareable and the kinds of insights that we want to make sure all of our friends on Twitter, even those who couldn't be here, are able to take with them and impact their careers for the better. So if you've got a boss tip to share, be sure to weigh in on the conversation on Twitter. And yes, our guest today's Twitter handle is @JessDAries, so feel free to include her, and we'll be able to continue answering questions that we don't get to on today's webinar on Twitter. So connect with us there, and without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you my boss and sister-in-law, Jessica Aries, who's going to walk us through today's webinar. Thanks so much for joining us, Jess.
Thank you for having me today, Emily. As Emily introduced me, I am Jessica Dobias Aries. I am a legal marketer in the legal industry. So what that means is I work with attorneys every day on building brands and marketing initiatives, as well as redoing their resumes and submitting proposals to potential clients. And as part of that, I've developed a lot of skills in this whole resume writing technique arena. I work along with UT Texas X's, the alumni program, to help recent graduates craft resumes as well as a volunteer opportunity. And as I've kind of progressed in my career, I've really found the value of this skills-based resume. Part of the reason I find value in it is because I've used it myself to find a number of jobs. And when I was in law school, what I'm trying to say is I was in law school and I took the path of becoming an attorney and realized really soon into the process that that wasn't the right career path for me. And I had to develop other skill sets that I thought would be valuable outside of the legal industry, which can be kind of difficult when you just spent 2 years, 3 years of your life dedicated to learning a specific study, like the legal industry. So what I found was really helpful was designing a skills-based resume around the skill sets that I had developed in the legal industry, as well as from outside things that I was truly passionate about, the skill sets that I felt would lead me into a legal marketing position. And so I've used this resume type in my own personal experience to help me get jobs, as well as help a lot of recent graduates, like I said, from the UT, and some of my attorneys even develop further their skills when they're trying to enter a new practice area or something like that. They can find this information and crafting a skills-based resume really valuable to them. So thank you for the introduction, Emily, and I'm really excited excited to share with you guys my skills, or not my skills, rather, my tips for writing a skills-based resume. So let's get started. What I'm going to do is take you through 3 key features of a skills-based resume. First, the key features of a skills-based resume. Second, how to discern what skills you should be highlighting in your resume. And third, how to demonstrate value in your resume. These are the 3 core areas. If you have all of this crafted in your resume, it's really going to shine, and it's going to make more of an impact when an HR person is reviewing your resume, or the hiring manager is looking for a potential person to hire and they see you have these skills. It makes it much easier for them. In my experience, I have found that job titles don't always reflect skills. So I use the example of a person at the Genius Bar at Apple. They have the title of a genius, but what does that really mean? It doesn't necessarily mean their skills reflect what their title is. So in a lot of instances, when I have clients who come to me and they want a particular position, they may be looking for a certain job title that doesn't always align with the skills they have. So sometimes you have to reverse it and look for skills that you have that fit within that particular position. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you go about doing that and how you can craft this type of skills-based resume. So to start, I'm going to talk about what a skills-based resume is. First, a skills-based resume is not like your traditional resume, which would include a full history of the work experience you have. Instead, it would highlight specific skills you need for a particular position and include a smaller section of your work history, which wouldn't detail to the same extent all of your past work experience. This is a really great resume for someone who is new to an industry, who's transitioning careers, like I said, or someone who's a recent graduate who doesn't have a lot of work experience in their particular field that they're looking to enter into. So that's why I like to focus on this type of resume. And it's also really good to use these techniques when crafting a skills-based resume just in your day-to-day life, so you can understand how you need to progress further in your career. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So the first step of creating a really well-crafted skills-based resume is you should already have something that I call as a brag book. It's essentially a list of all of your accomplishments and leadership positions you've ever had in your whole entire life. So these can be quite extensive and long, but it's important to always maintain a brag book of sorts that has every sort of accomplishment, leadership position, project you've worked on, anything that you think is worthy of listing. And you're going to use this to help craft your skills-based resume. And so what I tend to do is I tend to review my accomplishments every 2 to 3 months and write down those leadership positions and volunteer activities I've been involved in as they're ongoing. So it's not such a huge ordeal to have to go back and create a brag book. I have a brag book I maintain regularly, and that's really helpful when looking towards what skills you need to highlight and who you are as a person in terms of accomplishments and leadership positions. Third, after you've created this brag book and maintained it, you need to identify a role or a position that you would really like to be in. So I find with recent graduates, they're not always sure of what the exact position title is going to be, like I said, because titles can change from job to job. They don't necessarily coincide. Someone who, like I said, is an Apple genius is also like a help desk person, is also like an IT specialist. So the titles can vary from company to company. So it's really important to look for skills and to really look for the skills within a particular position that you identify with within that role. And so once you find a job description that you really like, I say find as many as possible, collect as many job descriptions as you can. And I kind of do like a nationwide search type of thing when I'm working with my clients. I look for as many job descriptions that relate to the particular role that they want, because the more information I can gather on that particular role, the more I can understand of what the industry expectations are for that role, and also learn what buzzwords are important for that particular role. So one job description, if you have a particular job that you're looking for, sure, have that one obviously set out as your prime example, but then also look for some other job descriptions that are related to that particular position or are in a similar role but at a different type of company, so you can understand those keywords and buzzwords. Next, you've identified your role. You need to identify skills specifically associated with that role. So as you're reading through the role, you may see a lot of action words, developed, implemented, responsible for, led, those types of words. If you look for those action words, you will be able to start to identify the skill sets associated with them, and that'll help you to identify what skill sets you need for that particular position. So I have an example here of a job description that I have done this with. So in this particular job description, it says collaborate with individual attorneys. This is actually a job description similar to my position that I have currently as a legal marketer. So it says collaborate with individual attorneys as required to develop personal business development plans, supply individual attorneys with competitive intelligence on client and industry marketing opportunities. The skills associated with this particular position, I've highlighted words that I associate with that particular skill. So for example, collaborate. To me, that screams communication. You have to be able to communicate if you're going to collaborate with people, especially attorneys. Develop personal business development plans. That to me screams planning. Planning's in the actual action. So that should be pretty straightforward. And then competitive intelligence on client and industry marketing opportunities. What that screams to me is research, the ability to do in-depth research and come up with conclusions based on that research, or at least analysis based on that research that you can then draw conclusions from. So these are the things that I identified from just this little section of a job description. And you'll see as you go through this process, you're going to find lots of different skills that you may identify within one particular job description, but they won't always necessarily be the skills you want to highlight. I'm going to talk about the skills you want to highlight. And this is where your brag book comes in. So if you actually look here, I have created what's called a T-chart where I have identified the job description skills on the left-hand side and my brag book accomplishments on the right-hand side. And this is really helpful if you go through this process because it'll help you determine what skill sets you need, or what skill sets rather you already have based on your brag book accomplishments. So for example, here I've drawn arrows between different brag book accomplishments and what they could be associated with skills-wise. So intern at a company where responsible for social media communications. You can talk about the social media strategies you used and how you set those up based on being an intern at that company. That's a particular accomplishment that you can highlight further and develop that skill of social media strategy. Planned lunches and outings for a volleyball team. This one may be a little bit of a stretch, but you could say that that's event planning. It's all about finding ways to communicate your accomplishments in ways that are truly valuable and effective to the hiring manager. And we'll talk about how you do that, but it may not feel like they completely fit at first, but as you continue through this process of developing the skills-based resume, it'll become more clear to you how you can develop those accomplishments into something that's meaningful to your hiring manager. So now that you've identified these skills, I want you to take a moment and set those aside. That seems kind of weird. You've done all this work, you've identified these skills. Now you need to set them aside though, because what you really need to do, and the most important part of your resume, the first thing someone sees is they see your professional profile, your professional statement, your professional, it has many names, but essentially is the section at the very top of your resume that says, and should say, and answer these three questions. What do you do? Who do you help? And why should they hire you? So what do you do? That's hopefully pretty clear to you now that you've determined what skills you have and what accomplishments you have, what you do on a daily basis, who do you help? Obviously an important question because the person reading your resume, an HR manager, a hiring manager, they're going to want to know, who do you help? Who's involved in helping you, and who do you provide assistance to? Because ultimately they're looking for someone to be a team player, someone who's a part of their collective group, their team members who are able to help others. And then why you should be hired. So the why can be difficult to answer, but as you start to craft your skills-based resume, I think it'll become clearer to you how to answer that why question. For right now, you may just kind of craft something and have to come back to it a little later after you finished your skills-based resume. I'm going to show you an example of a really good professional profile, and it's a little bit lengthy, and it's also for someone who clearly has a lot of experience. But the idea behind this is I really wanted to show you a really great one as an example. So here's a professional profile that I think is really amazing. An internationally recognized speaker on social media and business development who has trained over 10,000 professionals in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia on LinkedIn and successful social media use, a regular blogger, and is widely recognized within the professional services industry as a thought leader on social media. So what does this scream to you? First of all, if I'm the hiring manager, it screams to me, I want to hire this person. They clearly know what they're doing. Why do they know what they're doing? Well, I'm reading here that they've identified for me in the first line who they are, essentially, what they do on a daily basis. They're a social media and business development person. And who do they help? They help over 10,000 professionals in the US, UK, Canada, and Australia on LinkedIn. That's gold to me because now I know what they do and who they help. And if I'm looking for that particular type of person in a role, that screams to me I should hire this person. But on top of that, they've now outlined for me that they're widely recognized as a thought leader across the globe. So as the hiring manager or say an HR manager, this is really clear to me who it is I need to be hiring and that I should clearly call them in at least for a screening interview at the very least because they've identified everything I want answered from the start. So this is really valuable to the hiring manager or the HR manager. It really makes it clear to them who this person is. And that's, I think, the most important key to your resume from the start is having a really strong professional profile because it's the first thing that someone's going to read about you. So moving on from there, I'm going to talk to you about taking those skills that you set aside and actually putting them into action. So the skills part of this resume is probably going to be different from your traditional resume writing part. You've usually probably created skills underneath each of the experiences you've had. So for example, I'm a marketing manager. I would list out what I do on a daily basis as a marketing manager. And you usually probably keep the bullets kind of succinct, but I'm going to encourage you to actually make much more meaty statements. I'm going to encourage you to add scope and magnitude to your statements because I want you to remember that the HR manager or the hiring manager who's reading your resume may not know what really went into your position. So for this particular skill, I've showed you two different options. A is the more traditional option of writing just kind of responsible for all operations at Marriott Hotel downtown. This particular person was trying to highlight their hotel management skills. So responsible for all operations at Hotel Marriott in downtown Washington, D.C. Now look at B and read B with me. Manage a 250-room luxury Marriott property that generates over $150 million in annual revenue. Revitalize property from lost position to double-digit profitability within 2 years through complete redesign of all sales, catering, front desk, and security operations. Currently ranked number 3 for customer service of 560 Marriott properties nationwide. So what did this tell me? What did this bullet tell me that the first bullet didn't tell me? First of all, it showed me scope and magnitude of this position. This person clearly had a lot of responsibility, took something that was in a lost position and grew it into something that was worthwhile. And so think of these bullets as your sales statements. They're your opportunities to show truly how amazing the work is that you did in your particular position. They're your opportunity to highlight the successes you had. And this one obviously is for someone in the hotel management industry, but I'm going to show you one for, say, a recent graduate, because recent graduates always don't have that same level of expertise and experience, or I shouldn't say expertise, but experience. That's why they're recent graduates. They're looking for new jobs. So I'm going to show you how to take something like a volunteer position and take that skill and put it into action and make it really meaningful to your hiring manager. So on this slide, I had a recent graduate who was trying to apply for a position that required event planning skills. And so her bullet point read, plan volunteer organization's new member orientation. Okay, great. But as the hiring manager, what does that really mean to me? One of the most important questions that I ask my clients to ask themselves is, so what? Why do I care that you planned a volunteer organization's new member orientation? If you can't describe to me that you coordinated and planned an out-of-state 2-day new member orientation over the course of 12 weeks with a 3-person committee for a 120-person organization, wow, that's so much more impactful than, say, Part A, which is planned volunteer organization's new member orientation. It doesn't show the scope or the magnitude of the work you did. And your job as the interviewee, the person who's being interviewed for the job, is to show and demonstrate your skills. And so if you're able to write out statements like this, the coordinated and planned and out-of-state 2-day member activity, if you're truly able to show the scope and magnitude of what you're doing, it'll be so much more impactful to your hiring manager. And I know that this also means that your resume may become very, very long and lengthy, but I'm going to encourage you to actually limit your bullets and instead to choose skills and activities that you did that are truly meaningful and truly impactful to the organizations that you were a part of, and to highlight those because they're going to be so much more meaningful and impactful to the person reading the resume if they're truly something worth reading versus something that's just kind of mediocre. Try to highlight those instances where you've really done a great job. So the last step in all of this is putting everything together. And I have 2 different formats I'm going to show you guys. And I'm going to show you, it's hard to conceptualize these ideas. I have to actually show you examples. I'm going to have Emilie send out a link with the examples that I'm going to show you of actual resumes that have been recrafted. But the first thing you would do is combine and conquer, essentially. Combine everything that you have here, your professional profile, your skills and expertise, and your work history, awards, education, professional organizations, and other relevant skills into this resume. And again, like I said, you can limit your bullets because you're really spending the time on each of your bullets to craft something that's truly has magnitude and scope and has results also. So your professional profile would start, and then you'd have your skills and expertise, and you list out your first skill. So say it's hotel management. That's where you'd list skill 1, hotel management. And then underneath that, you'd go ahead and list out your skills in action example that we had. And then you list out, I recommend my clients include no more than 4 skills because otherwise it becomes overwhelming, the amount of information in each bullet. But I would say to limit it to no more than 4 and try to keep them, obviously succinct, but still very descriptive of what it is you did in your particular position or volunteer activity. And I also tell my clients they don't need to worry about these necessarily being in order of experience, meaning if you volunteered, a year ago, but that skill is the skills that you developed as a result of that volunteer opportunity or something that really helped you to craft that skill, then I would include it in whatever prevalence or order that you think fits with the job description. So if it's something that's truly a skill that the job description requires, then you can maybe put that higher up. And then for the work history section, this section is actually going to be very succinct. It's going to be where you literally list the company you worked for, the organization you worked for, your title, and the length of time you worked there. June 2010 to July 2014 or whatever. It's going to not include bullets underneath it. It's just going to be kind of like an outline. It's just a little timeline of where you worked because you really want to save the bulk of your space on your resume for your skills and expertise. And then you would highlight all the rest of your information in the other sections. The other alternative to a skills-based resume formatted like this is a skills-based resume formatted where you have your professional profile at the top and you include sub-bullets of skills that are related to the job, but not necessarily your core skills. So like Microsoft Office proficiency, let's say this is an executive assistant type of job, or skills that you think are still relevant, but not necessarily something you want to spend a bulk of your time highlighting in your experience section. And then in your experience section, you would have kind of like your traditional resume where you'd list out the company you worked for and the job you had. But then your sub-bullets for that area would actually focus on specific skills, and you would highlight them out in bold. So it was easy for the person who was reading your resume to recognize what skills went into going into that particular position. So this would be the example you would use if you needed a chronological resume. And this is what I would suggest using if you were trying to find some way to integrate your skills into a chronological resume. And then after that, you would include awards, education, professional organizations, and other relevant skills. And so I'm going to show you 2 samples of resumes that really work well in this format. So I'm realizing this is very difficult to see, and I'll make sure that Emilie sends these out to you all. But as you can see here, on the left side, A is the resume where you actually have your resume set up based around the skills entirely. And resume B is where you have your experience, but then you have specific skills highlighted within that experience that you think are relevant to the position you're applying to. And the relevancy of these skills is obviously based on what the job description requests, and also what level of expertise you have or what skills you have already from your brag book that you can kind of take and craft into something that's more meaningful. And one thing I would like to mention too, if you don't know what skills, I lost my presentation somehow.
I will bring it back up, Jess, no worries.
Okay. So anyways, if you're going through this process and you're realizing, wow, I don't know that I have any of the skills required for this position, don't fret. It's not the end of the world. What this does, going through this process of creating a skills-based resume, allows you to see what skills you need to further develop. And it allows you to tackle volunteer opportunities or to take on internships or to look for other opportunities to build skills in that particular area. So as you're going through this process, if that happens to you, don't freak out. Embrace it as an opportunity to learn more, learn something new, and try something else out. And you never know who you'll meet. I believe networking is another really important part of finding a job when you're, especially a recent graduate, or you're transitioning. And if you take on volunteer opportunities where you get that kind of exposure, you may meet someone who may offer you a job. You never know. So embrace the opportunity to learn new skills, and to always be thinking about what skills you need for that next level career that you want. And so that concludes my presentation. I would like to take any questions now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. That was really, really helpful. And I have to say thank you to everyone who's been blowing up our little chat bar down here. There's some really awesome tips and questions coming through that way. And it's part of what makes this community so exciting. And thanks also to those who've asked questions on Twitter. I'm going to highlight a few commonalities that I'm seeing come up. And then we'll open the floor for anyone who's got a question to feel free to tweet it at me at boss.org, or put it in the little chat bar in your bottom left corner of your window. The first is all about that professional statement, or that objective statement. I think some folks would like more clarity in terms of what exactly should be in there, first of all. And second of all, would it be bad if that is exactly what's on your LinkedIn under your summary, or are those comparable? We have
Those are comparable, in my opinion. A really well-crafted summary section in your LinkedIn is definitely something you can transition over to your profile section. The point of that statement is really to give the reader or the HR person who is looking at your resume a succinct statement of who you are. And what you should really include in here is what information you think you think is most relevant to the position. So for example, if you want to, I'm going to use my example of marketing manager. If you want to work in the marketing manager field, then you need to be able to display some level of marketing expertise. And so you may use the words like marketing professional, or sometimes with my recent graduates, they use stuff like recent graduates, because they want to express the fact that they don't have a lot of experience, but that they do have a degree, which is very important to a lot of positions. So the actual words you use, that's kind of based on the position you're applying for, as well as kind of where you are in your career. But professional is always a great keyword to use. And I think this is also, it's also important in that professional profile to include keywords or buzzwords that relate to your particular field. You know, if you're going into corporate finance, you're going to have different keywords than, you know, a marketing person versus an HR person. So you really need to find those buzzwords from the job descriptions and try to highlight those within your professional statement.
Love it. Thank you. And so, one of the things I love about a skills-based resume is that it enables you to highlight the most pertinent skills you have, especially when your immediate past experience isn't something you want to highlight or isn't something you
Yes.
want to continue. Here at Boss Up, we really help women navigate career transition. And so many women I talk to feel beholden to the status quo. Like, oh, well, I'm a doggy daycare practitioner right now. And that's the first line on my resume that people see. There's nothing I can do about that. I love the skills-based resume because it says, first of all, whose rules are those? Okay. You can break out of the mold and highlight the skills you have that you want your employer to know about. It's not misleading. It's not lying. It's effective communication. That being said, there have been some exceptions and actually some interesting sort of contradictions that have come up in today's chat, specifically in working for the government through the Office of Personnel Management in particular. We're hearing from women here in DC, especially, who say, you can't do this. The office says you have to go chronologically. And then we've got other women chiming in saying, yeah, that's all I see in my industry. What do you have to say to that in terms of, is this a hard and fast rule? Is this something that's changing? How much do we need to follow the rules versus highlighting the skills we think are most pertinent? What might you say to that?
I think it's important, obviously, if the requirements for the application require you to go chronological, you can't lie about the order
Sure.
of that particular job position that you're applying for. You have to go in that order. I
Sure.
think what's important to ask, though, yourself is, if you're applying for this, government type of job or something like that, and you're trying to get into that field, how can you get your resume not only in front of HR person, but also the hiring manager or a director? How can you network your way into that position? That may sound crazy, but
Yeah.
I've seen so many people actually work their way around the whole system of having to go through the online system by networking and by taking those opportunities to take on the volunteer, like I said, opportunities related to their particular industry, where they meet other people and are able to bypass the whole entire process of having to go in chronological order as a requirement. They may still have to go through the HR process at the end, meaning where they have to submit something in chronological order, but the hiring manager already wants them. They're not going to care if they were a dog walker for the last
Yeah.
because they've already met this person and know they'd be a good fit. And so I think it's important that this is not, the skills-based resume is not the end-all be-all. You also have to be out there, putting yourself out there, meeting people in your industry and meeting people who could potentially help you guide you into the career you want. You can't just sit behind your computer all day and apply for jobs. You definitely have to be out there and look for opportunities even within your current position to highlight skills. If you go through this process, you may find there are universal skills within different positions. Like, I'm thinking of the doggy walker, right? You still have to be able to communicate with people. You still have to be able to know some level of customer service to be in that position. So you can always leverage that into something that could potentially lead you somewhere outside the doggy walking industry.
Sure. Yeah. Literally, my dog is like in my bedroom right now, which is why I'm thinking about that. I'm a crazy dog lady. But I'm so glad you brought that up, because some research that I've stumbled upon in my time with Bossed Up has pointed to the fact that in some ways, and this is not true for all of us, but in some ways, women can hold themselves back because we are more likely than our male counterparts to be stridently adherent to the rules. When we see a set of rules, we follow them. And actually, what research has shown is that when we don't meet all of the required qualifications on a job description, we women don't apply. When men reach 70% or 30% or much less than 100%, that's okay with them. They say it's still worth the risk. I'm qualified. I can give this a shot. And so I would throw a cautionary tale out there, or just sort of a moment of caution to those of us who are afraid to break the rules a little bit. I know, controversial, but our adherence to the rules and the way things are can sometimes hold us back. So if your chronological resume isn't making you look your best, I would say dare to go outside of those lines a little bit, because a skills-based resume can make all the difference in the world, as can networking, as Jessica talked about. And though we should have a whole other webinar to address that subject matter, there are some really great examples of women who have, grown their communities strategically to land the job that they want in our Fierce Friday series at bossedup.org. So you can check out our blog for Fierce Friday features or subscribe to our email newsletter where you'll get them delivered to your inbox every week, because a lot of women's stories have to do with how they navigated that kind of a transition. Wow, I'm seeing some people blow up the chat room now, but I had a question that I saw come up earlier while we have you on the line, Jess. And maybe we'll take like one or two more questions.
Okay.
The first is about career transition. How can you speak a little bit more to the idea of identifying transferable skills to position yourself to make a transition? Like, what does that positioning look like, or what can that maybe sound like? Or maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about pivoting away from being a lawyer and focusing on marketing in the legal field. How did you navigate that kind of transition, and what tips do you have for others doing the same?
So partly my story is 2 years into law school. Law school is a 3-year process, and I actually was doing a joint JD LLM, which is a master's of law, and my Juris Doctorate at the same time. So I was actually in a 3.5-year program. But 2 years into that program, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer, which, like I said, is kind of a scary and crazy thing. And so what I started doing in that moment was looking for classes and courses I could take that could further my ability to be marketable in the industry.
Yeah.
And I also looked for things that I was passionate about currently, areas that I found were really feeding my soul and my desire to work in a field. And I found that I was blogging actually for a website called Social Media Law Student. I was blogging for that industry, and I was learning so much about marketing from it because I was having to, write SEO friendly headlines and talk about, sharing and click rates and all this kind of stuff. And I realized this is really cool. This is a fun area. So that was a volunteer opportunity, like I said, that I took on to write for this particular website. And it really taught me a lot about marketing in the process. And I realized I needed to grow those skills further. So I kind of focused my coursework at that time on the marketing industry. I looked at, I was in an LLM program on IT and privacy law. So I looked at IT and privacy law. This is really strange, but classes that actually had a marketing component. And I ended up taking a digital advertising regulatory class where I learned all about behavioral advertising, which is a component of marketing and advertising. And I looked for courses that I could take where I could learn more about my industry, maybe in the legal way, but I could still leverage that later into something that was meaningful. So a lot of it, like I said, is volunteer and is identifying those opportunities that you may have in front of you that you don't realize you can leverage. And then I also networked. I reached out to my particular professor in that industry and asked her, who do I need to get in contact with? And she actually pointed me to the Legal Marketing Association, which is a international organization, which I'm a part of, and told me I need to reach out to some people there.
You're bearing the lead on that one. Didn't you just receive a national award from that very association?
Yes, I did. Okay. I won an award from them. But a lot of what I have learned was from going to meetings with those particular people in the legal marketing industry and asking them questions and asking them what other information I needed to learn. I learned from joining that organization that there's much more to legal marketing than just click-through rates. There's a whole components within that industry that I needed to further develop. And those led me down the path of finding an internship that was actually in legal, but it was related to marketing. Cool. And I just kept growing and growing that expertise. And it wasn't a super fast process. I mean, this was like a 1.5-year process. And I mean, I was in school the whole time. I think if I had all of my energies dedicated toward it could have been a faster process. But looking for those opportunities, identifying opportunities to leverage the skills that you already have or the skills that are transferable. And it sometimes can be hard to see what skills are transferable, but there are some universal skills in any position that are transferable. You just have to take the time to identify them. And I think that's why going through the process really helps. Writing out your brag book and comparing it to your job descriptions. It really does help. And it even helps in the future as you continue to develop that brag book.
And to me, there's just a component of mental patience with ambition. Sometimes, what I gleaned from your story is that you have the ambition to make a transition, which is a huge part of your identity. It's a huge part of what bosses are all about. And yet you have to have patience with yourself because it takes time. You can't, today, if you want to transition industries, you're not going to be able to necessarily write the best resume to get your dream job right away. It might mean proactively seeking out growth opportunities, growth assignments, and making that transition is not easy and it doesn't happen overnight. But by gaining the skills, by doing the research that you talked about, you can identify the skills you need to gain, then go gain them or begin to at least. And then it'll be a little easier to write the resume that'll land you a job in that industry. And it's
Exactly.
hard out there. I hear from women all the time who have full-time jobs and are trying to transition or might have two jobs or a job and a family. And we all have lots of obligations. So just know, bosses, that the patience with yourself and ambition can coexist peacefully. Like, just because you're ambitious doesn't mean you can't be patient.
I think that's great advice, Emilie. I really do.
So I know that a lot of bosses I work with feel that way. And that's why we're really all about bringing those women together to say, it's going to be all right. Let's support one another. And this is a journey that we're all on. So thank you for being a part of that and making today's conversation so rich. I've got one other question for you. And then I'm going to wrap up with a few announcements of the amazing things we have coming down the line. So stay tuned. Jess, I know this isn't necessarily on the docket for discussion when we talk specifically about resumes, but what do you think about cover letters? Does the cover letter, is it required with a skills-based resume as much as a chronological, or what is that relationship?
I think it depends on the particular position you're applying for.
Sure.
So part of the purpose of a cover letter, at least what I've been told the purpose of a cover letter is by different HR managers, is to show that you have the ability to write. So if you're taking the time to truly craft out really great bullet points within your skills-based resume, it may not always be necessary to have a cover letter. But if you're applying for a job that maybe the position, a lot of your results and a lot of the information you're putting into your actual skills is very data-based and let's say like an IT specialist, I keep thinking of them.
Sure.
You may want to show that you have the ability to communicate and write, full-on paragraphs and can come up with a cohesive and concise statement of why you're interested in a position. So it kind of depends on the position and what you're applying for. I would say like in a marketing role or something like that, which I'm in, business development, sales, business role, you may not necessarily need a cover letter if you're doing a skills-based resume, but maybe in those roles where you have to highlight, a lot of results and numbers, I'm thinking project management or IT projects management or science-based type stuff, you may want to be able to provide a cover letter because you can show I can write reports, I can write, things to the managing, CEO or whoever. I'm able to provide feedback in that way. So awesome. That's at least what I think the purpose of a cover letter is and why so many companies ask for them.
Totally. Well, thank you again, Jess, and thank you to our crowd today. You've asked such great questions. You've already given me ideas for all the different workshops that we'll be offering soon. So stay tuned. At the top of each month, you'll get an email with all the upcoming events that have more information about these webinars. Also, before I forget, Jessica is available to give you one-on-one consultations on your resume. Just head over to the URL here, the fiverr.com URL, and I'll include this in our follow-up materials as well. Aren't I lucky to have such a boss of a sister-in-law? I'm so glad you were able to join us, Jess. Thank you again. And like Jess said, we'll be sending around all of these materials for your consumption and perusal at a later date. To wrap things up, we are so excited to have our upcoming Boss of the Year party next Thursday here in DC. That's July 2nd. Can you believe July is a week away already? Where we've got 5 women who have gone to Boss Up Boot Camp and transformed their lives in powerful ways. We've nominated them, and you can see their stories and vote for them at our website, bossedup.org. You can also join us to celebrate powerful women everywhere with amazing treats like free drink tickets to the first 25 people who arrive and boozy cupcakes that combine sort of hitting your sweets fix and getting your buzz on by a boot camp alum of ours who's got a business in making these delicious kind of, like adult cupcakes. So they're really fun. We've got music, we've got fun, we've got friends, and it's just going to be an amazing event. We have 18 sponsor organizations who are coming together to really champion women helping women and women who are committed to being a boss in their life. So come on over. We also have a lot more Wednesday workshops coming your way. Stay tuned for an email with even more information about that. That usually hits the top of your inbox at the top of the month. And Jess's story is actually chronicled in one of our Fierce Friday features last Friday. So if you head over to bossedup.org, you can read all about her story and learn even more there. And finally, for those who want to do that kind of in-depth work of taking a weekend at Bossed Up Bootcamp to get a restart or navigate transition with skills-based training, all delivered by experts across work, love, and wellness in a way to really get clear on what you want and leave with a roadmap to go and get it. With an amazing community of bosses, we're already half sold out for the end of July's Bossed Up Bootcamp here in Washington, D.C. We've got scholarships, payment plans available, so do not delay. If you are interested, apply today at bossedup.org/bootcamp. Thank you so much for joining us once again. There's a lot more coming from Bossed Up in the coming years and weeks and days and months. So thanks for spending your afternoon with me, bosses. Until next time, keep bossing, and I'll talk to you soon.